What'd you do? Hey, Kent.
I have seen you speaking of well,
Yeah, since we have a quorum. This is for May 12th. So,
Good evening. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Tom Widmer, and I welcome everyone here to this special meeting tonight of the Board of Commissioners and invited guests to discuss the issue of hunting dogs and how we might resolve some of the issues that we've faced in the past. I would like to call this meeting to order and welcome each of you, and just ask for a moment of silence. Amen. I'd like to ask the commission to accept the agenda. Do I have a motion to do so? All right. Do I have a second? Okay. I had a motion from Commissioner. What is your name? From Commissioner Alexander and a second from Commissioner Otto. All those in favor of the agenda adoption, please signify by saying aye. And there are no no's, so we will proceed. What I'd like to do is start with introductions, and maybe we can just go around starting with Kent. We'll go around this way, and we'll end up with you, Mason, who will be facilitating the discussion.
Ben Blackwood, Town Administrator. Walter Somerville, Town Resident.
Rusty Douglas, Town Resident.
Mason Blake, Commissioner. Absolutely.
This meeting is being live streamed. So what I appreciate is if you would take the microphones out of the stands and you're each sharing a mic, please, when you speak, hold the mic close to your mouth and speak directly into it. Not so much for our sake here, but for the sake of the streaming. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for everyone being here this evening, and thanks for the commission. I'm the rookie on the commission, and when this issue came up, I thought it might be a good idea to discuss the bear hunting situation we incurred in January in a sort of a workshop fashion, and bring all the major parties involved to the table so we could talk across the table from each other, just as we hopefully will do tonight, and share ideas, share thoughts, be free to react to other things the things that everybody else has to say. So thank you for being here. Our goal of the meeting, as I said, is to discuss in an informal workshop format possible actions the town council might take in response to the bear hunting dog incidents that occurred in January. We're not going to take any action at this time. The council may or may not take action at a future meeting. This meeting is for talking. Our goal, ultimately, certainly from nothing I've heard from the commission, is not to overhaul our animal control ordinance. Our goal is not to address any problems other than we faced in January. This is a very focused. The goal of this meeting is very focused, and the hope is perhaps we might be able to reach some sort of consensus on some sort of actions that the council might take in addressing the hunting dog incidents. We may not reach a consensus, but at the very least, the goal is that we would have had some thoughtful discussion about several alternatives the council might take. To open the discussion, I'd like to follow up by saying, you know, look and thinking about this, I think it's helpful if we define the problem narrowly. The problem isn't our dog control ordinance. The problem isn't dogs in general. The problem is specific incidents that occurred, which involved multiple dogs, not one or two, but multiple dogs. And the problem didn't happen just anywhere in Montreat. The problem happened and was problematic because it happened in residential areas. And the problem also was unique in that it wasn't just dogs, but it was hunting dogs chasing bears. Those three things sort of put together created some aspects of this problem that are unique. And so I just want to touch on those and then open the meeting up for discussion. The first thing that's unique is that situations were dangerous. They were dangerous, and we saw pictures that Jolie or her husband took, and it was obviously dangerous. And I've received emails from several people in the community that witnessed that danger firsthand. At least in one instance, children were at risk near hunting dogs chasing bears. And at least the one incident we know about. The other thing that's unique, and Chief Aronson and I talked about it the other day, is when a situation occurs, the town's not equipped for it. The town can't deal with a pack of hunting dogs on the chase. We don't have the equipment. We don't have the personnel. The county's not equipped for it. I've talked to the county. I've talked to their animal control, head of their animal control. We have no agreement with them whereby they would send us animal control folks. If we wanted them to, they wouldn't. They're not. We would have to enter into a interlocal agreement with the county. County only has 2 municipalities with which it has those agreements. One is Black Mountain. One is, I believe, Woodfin. They're not entering into any more agreements with municipalities because they just don't have the resources. So even if the county was willing to enter into a local agreement with us, which the staff anyway is not, they don't have the resources to address this problem. And even if they did have those resources, I'm not sure they could get us those resources on a timely basis. So another aspect of this problem is we've got nothing on the ground here to deal with. We had a dangerous situation and we don't really have an effective way for the town to deal with. So it's very unique. And that's why I like to, as we talk about what the city council might do is to keep our focus narrowly on, hey, how do we deal with this? And not just have use a sledgehammer to deal with a very narrow problem. And so that when we look at possible things we can do from the perspective of ordinances, that we make those ordinances narrow. And so I'll open it up. There's, and like to get everyone's discussion. I sent a memo around several months ago and have copied folks with it again. There are, the main problem we have here in Montreat is we've got, and it's not a problem, but I'll just show you. I like it. Here's our animal control ordinance. It's really not even 2 pages. This is dog control. It's 1 page and a paragraph. All the other animals are taken care of there. This is Buncombe County. Much smaller print, 32 pages. This is not what we want. This is not what we want to discuss. This is not where I hope we're headed. The point I'm making is we have a simple approach, and I think a simple approach is best. But the problem one of the problem we have with our ordinance is, and we found out in these instances, there was nothing our police department basically could do when it arrived at the scene. They didn't have the facilities to deal with the problem, and they were unable to press any charges effectively in the midst of the melee. That's what's happening when those dogs are there, to try to deal with whatever penalty. The only penalty Chief Aaron could have given them, the way our ordinance is drafted, is a verbal warning. If they'd come back the next week, the only penalty he could have imposed is a written warning. If we'd have waited until next January for them to come back, after a year has elapsed, he'd just have to give them another verbal warning. Because after a year, you go back to the penalty didn't click in. So we've got penalty problems in the sense that the penalty provision for dogs, first, doesn't anticipate hunting dogs. And secondly, the penalty that is imposed doesn't anticipate, is a general penalty for any violations of a number of provisions of the ordinance, including noise control and trash control and that sort of stuff, not just dogs. So with that introduction, I'd like to talk about what suggestions anybody around this table has from your perspective about what kind of actions the city council should take. Okay. All right. Jolie suggests a fine. Any other comments on the fine? Big fine or small fine?
Couldn't you model it after some of the documentation that you have from Booncomb?
From Buncombe County? We could. And in my memo, I sort of did something like that. I said we could, have so much for first violation, so much for second violation. One of the things we can also consider is to, again, getting back to tailoring it even more specifically, is leave the fine as is for one or two dogs, because one or two dogs is not our problem. Or at least from talking with Chief Aaron, we've not gotten any problems with being very neighborly and just a verbal warning. Is that the case, Chief?
Yes, sir. That's generally the case, because more often than not, 9.9 times out of 10, we're talking about a resident or a visitor walking their pet or pets.
So rather than creating a penalty where we don't need a penalty, we might, or a fine where we don't need a fine, is to fashion the fine to circumstances where we've got, let's say, 3 dogs or more. In order to, make it more specific. Does that make sense to folks?
Again, like we discussed earlier in this week, I think if it was y'all's decision to craft a standalone ordinance or to modify one that was in existence, as long as there was verbiage to the effect of, as to or for hunting purposes, then that allows us to focus, and we start looking at intent and action as opposed to something that's just more broad and encompassing.
Okay, well, we can think about that. Again, another purpose we want to do is to make sure it's enforceable and proof, and not create a burden of proof, but the details we can. I mean, 3 dogs running at large together, uh, uh, with the appearance of hunting is, I think, probably good enough. We can figure that out. But the idea is we're not, we're not trying to find the average homeowner here in Montreat who happens to be walking one or two dogs. So, Jim?
I think that part of the problem that happened last year was because these hunters that came in from outside turned on a bear in Montreat. And they caught that bear here in Montreat. Whereas typically when you turn on a bear, say in McDowell County, and it may run 5-10 miles and pass through Montreat, those dogs typically are not even close to the bear. They follow behind the bear. And sometimes a bear will go up a tree and the dogs will tree the bear. At that point, if we have tracking collars, if we see that our dogs are in Montreat, we will come retrieve them expeditiously without guns, without anything, and remove them so that they're not a problem. I don't think that this has been a problem. We've hunted for 70 years, and I don't believe it's been a serious problem until you had people coming in from outside and turning dogs loose at Montreat around the dumpster or wherever to try to hunt an easy bear. And we want to retrieve our dogs. We don't want to be part of the problem. But it's very difficult, but like I've said at the other meetings, to know where your dogs are going to go. But typically the dogs are not anywhere close to the bear with the way we hunt them.
Sure. And do your dogs though? I mean, I've never, as I told you yesterday when we talked, Jim, I've never seen your dogs in any residential neighborhood in Montreat. Do they ever get there?
Our hunting property is basically on the other side of this ridge right here. So while we may turn dogs out way over on our property, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump for them to come over and rainbow and come down. And yes, they have, but we try to catch them before. I mean, the idea is not to let them get here. We try to catch them before they cross into the Montreat wilderness area.
Okay.
Just a question to whomever would like to jump in. Are there other communities that we know of that have had similar circumstances? And if so, how have they dealt with it? And maybe the Wildlife Resources Commission has had that experience.
So yes, sir, that is our number one thing when it comes to dog hunting. The dogs come on other people's property. And of course, the hunter cannot walk onto the property just to get their dog. They have to have permission from the landowner. But if it's posted, we can charge for LPA, which is a trespass. Or you can call your local police and they can do trespassing even if it's not posted. That's really pretty much the only thing we do.
Trespass is one of the alternatives we are looking at ordinance wise.
So I grew up in Montreat, and my dad hunted, I think with probably your dad or uncle some point back in history. And I've seen hunting dogs occasionally, but it has never been a problem. And the only group that's missing here tonight are the group of hunters that were causing the problem. So I'm interested in who are they? And that's the focus for me. How are they? And are they regularly going to come back to this area? Do they live nearby? Is there a way of communicating with them? Or are they just kind of off the grid?
I mean, I think that's our point. We think we know Jim's group has not been a problem. And the question is, how do we hit those folks and not, be a detriment to the responsible group that we have been great neighbors with for, 50 years.
To your point, the 4 incidents that were discussed and recorded back in January or February when we had the first discussion were all down in this end of town, not where you all are. And I think at one of the discussions, Jim said that they're coming in over the Rainbow area from Black Mountain. So how do we control that?
We knew one group, or at least it was reported to Peggy Williamson, one group that they ended up encountering up on Chapman going that way. It's a bear they had chased from north, somewhere on that side of the mountain, over through here. That's what was told to her. Now, may or may not have been the truth, but that's what she said to us.
Well, I was in response to that question. I mean, I don't really know the answer to it. If they're coming from what I guess is wildlife management area, is that into here? I mean, there's the obvious element of, is there a way to appropriately, mark or blaze that? Is there some, I don't know if there's some, orange blaze or purple blaze or something that hunters would know means I can't go across there. And so I think that could be something that we can look into. One of the things that I'm just kind of, as I listen to this, and again, I've never bear hunted a day, so I don't quite know how it works, but I wonder if there's a difference between retrieving a dog and hunting a dog and the actions that they take. And if there's some kind of distinction that can be made. I mean, the videos that I saw, what I saw the dogs doing clearly looked like they were hunting that bear, which would seem to me is distinctly different in both action and and threat than picking up a dog that has wandered over in this area. But again, I don't know. I'm kind of ignorant how that works, but I think that might be something to think about.
Yeah, and that's another reason to maybe make it several dogs, or at least in my thinking, which may be faulty, but and usually is. But the think of making it 3 dogs, you're not going to have, which I have seen on a number of occasions, 1 or 2 dogs that will wander down, or even more likely, in case like my oldest grandson's up hiking Graybeard, and they find 2 dogs that have been lost, and they bring them down, and the dogs follow them because they're starving. So you see the 1s and 2s, and that's what I've seen. I've never seen any like we've experienced in January. That's those kinds of dogs in Montreat before. But I appreciate your possible distinction between hunting and retrieving in terms of crafting an ordinance.
I found your memo to be very helpful, either the addition of some ordinances or recrafting of some. I would be interested from the chief and from Jim, the bear hunter, if they've read this, and is this helpful, or where is it problematic? I saw this as a step in the right direction, trying to keep bears and dogs out of residential areas and out of the playground, which was my concern that particular day. I mean, I think there's a win-win in this thing some way or another, but I would need the input of the 2 of you on a document like this. Is this too restrictive? Does it have too many loopholes? The other problem I saw from the listen to the last discussion had to do with the group that had come into town. It seemed to me if there had been an opportunity for them to register, people didn't know who, we still don't know, sounds like, who they were, what they were doing, and what their names were. And the people who met them really didn't want to get their name and address, or they probably didn't want to give it. But if they had to register prior to being involved here, it might be a step in the right direction. But I'm interested in comments on this document.
Well, we have a pretty good idea who these hunters are, and I'm not going to give names, but there needs to be some deterrent to them, I agree. Keep them from doing it. And you know, I feel that fines just to get out of control. I really don't know what the solution is. If it's our dogs, we know they're here, we're gonna come get them. And, you know, we don't want to trespass. We'll call the chief and let him escort us. Because a lot of these people aren't year-round residents. Their houses are empty for the good part of the bear season anyway. The cold dead of winter, I mean, so getting permission from a homeowner to retrieve your dogs from their front yard if they're not there is it's not reasonable. But if we go call the chief and let him escort us onto the property to retrieve our dogs, I think it would be a good part of the solution.
But Jim, if you suspect these guys, where are they coming in? How are their dogs getting here? Are they coming into town, going up into as close to the wilderness area as they can and releasing the dogs? Or are they coming in from over the mountain from some other location?
It's my understanding it's a combination of both of those things. An individual can have a 1 acre piece of land back behind there and put a 50-gallon drum full of peanuts on it to attract the bears, and then turn their dogs loose, and they're liable to just come right into town. And that's legal for them to do that, but not to just come into town. Or if they're riding the roads in Monterey and happen to see a bear, for them to drop the tailgate and turn their dogs out, that should be stopped completely. That should never be allowed. Turning dogs out in Monterey, I think, was part of the problem.
There was a lot of points that was just dropped in the past few minutes. I'm trying to address them all, try to keep up with them. First of all, to look at the timeline, we were looking at December 31st, I believe was where this really came to a culmination. January 1st. What's the last day of bear season? January 1st. Okay, so it was January 1st. It was a Saturday. Is when all this really came to a head. That's when we had the volume of calls coming in that particular morning in regards to this particular group as to how they came into Monterey, right through the gate over there, because they did have their vehicles. Now, that's not to say they were not tracking the dogs that came in over this ridge line, that ridge line, you know, into Monterey. Mason, you had mentioned earlier this week when we were talking that news had come to you that there was at least one eyewitness that had seen them drop the tailgate and let these dogs out. So that is that's painting a pretty clear picture of their intent, you know. So, you know, clearly these folks were in the wrong as far as any sort of action to address that. With dispatch, since supposedly somebody had seen a rifle or something to that effect there, whenever there's a firearm in play, they're calling another agency, usually Black Mountain, to send somebody up here for backup. So I actually had a Black Mountain officer, Sergeant Kaiser, Josh Kaiser, used to be with us, who was on the way up. Mike Dixon, who was working for the county that day, he came out. So we actually had a pretty good little presence here briefly between 3 different agencies. Once we got to this crew, I never saw a firearm in anybody's hands. That's not to say they weren't in the vehicles. I'm sure they were. But they were in the process of retrieving the dogs. By that point in time, after multiple calls and being hemmed up in this for about 40 minutes or so, I sort of rolled out the unwelcome wagon for them, let them know mine and the town as a whole's displeasure at what they had been doing. Now, to my knowledge, they've not been back since. So I don't know if that's a testament to how effective that conversation was, because, well, it was the last day of bear hunting season. So for whatever's been put into place now, or whatever that could be put into place, we really won't know the effectiveness of it until we roll into October, mid-October, 15th, something like that. So again, I don't know the effectiveness of that conversation, but there again, it may have been incredibly effective. I have an idea of who some of the folks were. I'm sure there's another name or two we can come up with. So,
What kind of language or what kind of fence would have been helpful to you in that if you had met those guys and realized they've let dogs loose in a residential area, this is not going to work? But what kind of language would you have needed from the town to take some action to stop them from doing that?
well, I think the language already exists in there between certainly with the leash ordinance and animals not under control and stuff like that. So we had existing things there.
But Chief, the language doesn't. The language says all you can do is give them a verbal warning. That's all. Or you can impound their dogs, and you're not equipped to impound their dogs. You don't have the equipment to do it.
Correct.
You're not going to take in 5 hunting dogs in a melee chasing a bear.
Correct, but they were there and they did have that. So it was, again, at that particular point in time, my interest was in solving the immediate problem at hand. As far as a follow-up for fines and penalties and stuff like that, yeah, absolutely. But at that particular moment, the problem was the problem. So that's why we do need the cooperation of the hunters and to allow them to retrieve, as he pointed out, it's in the past, you have so many of these houses that were empty and, you know, with the cottagers manual, that's been some years now, so it's not completely up to date. So it is difficult to get a hold of homeowners.
But Chief, you can't have people coming in, letting their dogs loose in Montreat and then relying on them to cooperate to pick up their dogs later after they finish.
It's correct.
I think you've got to have something that deters them, rather than saying, well, there's nothing we can do, so we'll just have to stand by and watch them pick their dogs back.
No, so that's not my suggestion. I think we absolutely have that put something into the books for the deterrence. Again, that comes back into intent. Is it somebody picking up their dogs that have roamed for miles on end versus the knuckleheads that come in? And again, I'm not sure if poaching is the right word here, but it's in the same vein. It comes down to the intent of the dog's owners.
Jim, go ahead. You want to respond
I'm
to that?
sorry, Chief, but how would you determine that? I mean, what would be, I understand what you're saying, but how would you determine?
Well, there is a level of difficulty to that for sure. Looking back at this example that these guys gave us, since it's the only example we have to look at, multiple sightings across multiple days. You know, it's like, okay, your dogs erroneously ran into Montreat on Tuesday. Yeah, it happens. Your dogs are back here on Wednesday. What's the problem? This must be a really strong, back here multiple days to the point that, you know, I'm dealing with them on a Saturday. You've established a track record there. So I think that is certainly pushing us in the right direction, determining their intent. You know, usually, I don't know how long it takes to effectively corral a bunch of jazzed up dogs that have been tracking a bear for miles and miles. You know, are they responsive to Prancer, Dancer? You get in the truck, it's time to go. Or I imagine it's more than a handful trying to bring them in control. Basically, the actions of the hunters, you know, not only, you know, what has brought them here, what their activity is, how enthusiastic and effective their remedy is, you know, in working with us or solving the problem before we can get there and address it.
So Jim, I got a few things I want to sort of get educated, maybe if you can, a little bit on the bear hunting aspect, but I guess just following up a little bit here. In my 15 years here in Montreat, this appears to be more of an isolated, fortunately has not been something that has occurred every year.
understandably though, as you were saying, Rusty, bears running through the park or whatever, that's concerning. But would you consider this more of an isolated event, or is this something of things to come in the future? As far, and I know that's a hard question in the fact of, I trust what you were doing with your club, but you know, what are the chances of us policing other clubs and saying, hey, we're, you know, in a gentleman's way, we're not going to have that.
I really can't hardly address that, except to say that typically the dogs are not up with the bear. And the bear may cross. It is hard for the dogs to get to the bear unless the bear goes up a tree or under a house or under a porch. And I think that, you know, if these people continue, you're going to have a problem.
Okay.
We don't have a problem. We have a hard time catching our own dogs before they go in the Asheville watershed. But the bear will cross the road, and then 2 minutes later, you'll hear the dogs coming, and you try to get them off the path, so to speak, catch them before they go over there. And we have to call the Asheville watershed, and they'll help us go in and retrieve our dogs, and then we come out. A lot of times they cross the parkway, like somebody was saying, that might be a day or two later that they come wandering back, hungry and ready to go home. It's hard, you have no idea where a bear is going to go or where the dogs are going to follow. Typically, the dogs are not right with the bear unless they turn loose on that bear right here, and it's on its tail as it hits through town.
So with it, I think, Tom, like I said, we got about 3 or 4, but as far as, so I think I know the answer to this, the chances of pulling the dogs off, you let them off in McDowell County, they're coming over the ridge line, coming into Montreat, the chances of you heading the dogs off when they're in full pursuit of a bear is pretty rare, I'm assuming.
We try to catch them at the top of the mountain, the trail that goes from Sourwood Gap all the way down to Ridgecrest, where the Montreat line, the government line, our line all kind of run together through there. We try to cut them off there so they never get to Montreat. But it's not unheard of for our dogs to cross over and go across Flat Creek and under Walker's Knob and get up in the wilderness up that way. And they might come down into Montreat, the upper end of Montreat. And we try to get them as soon as possible. When we see them, we'll go into the caboose and try to walk up the trails and retrieve them before they get down into the more residential areas.
Okay. And then one last follow up there, because we use the word dangerous, and I do. Again, as if there's a bear involved, I think it's a dangerous situation. I guess, again, this might be a tough one to answer. What would you consider more dangerous? Your dogs chasing a bear through Montreat, or a bear hanging out at the park on a Sunday afternoon, rummaging through the dumpsters?
A bear's a bear.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I would say a bear is dangerous, and a female bear with cubs is the most dangerous. People that put bird seed out in their backyards, or leave garbage unattended, or dog food in their carports, they're inviting trouble. They don't need bear dogs to cause that. When bears get used to coming into town, they're going to come into town.
And that's what I was afraid you were going to answer that way. As we know, we've got more people living here in Montreat. We've got more bird feeders out. We've got more trash in the dumpsters. So and we've got, I guess last I heard, 6% bear growth. Is that somewhat accurate? But so that I say that, and the fact that we got more people coming into Montreat, it sounds like we're going to have more bears coming into Montreat. And so I'm it's a tough situation, because I feel like it's a good thing to have you guys out there helping control this population. But then the fact that, you know, we've got to find a place in there that we can stop these folks from opening. I mean, the fact that someone saw folks open up their tailgate, and drop dogs out, you know, we've got to have some bite there. No pun intended, but, you know, to be able to pull that back. And I appreciate the fact that your group's not doing that. But like I said, you know, it's a tough situation for us to figure out how we can stop other folks from coming in here doing that.
Well, you could always get license plates of these offenders. May not be advisable to confront them. Get their license plate and call the chief or something and let them pursue it. Because most of these old country boys are armed and don't want a confrontational situation.
Jim, just looking back maybe over the last couple of years, whatever your recollection might be, how often have y'all had to come down and collect any of your dogs outside or inside Montreat?
Usually a couple times a year. You never know. I mean, they might be up in Big Piney. They might be up Flat Creek. They might come across and not very often.
How big a burden is it for you to know that? Giving us a will feel kind of fast. Is that a problem? You call the police department and say, hey, you're heading down, look out for it.
No, we're happy to do that. We welcome that kind of working together. Like I said at the last meeting, we want to be part of the solution to this. We want to help the town of Montreat. We want to remain good neighbors.
So those of you who don't know me, I did not have an incident with the bear, but my niece did. I think maybe in the document that Mason sent out, she and her family were getting ready to leave Montreat. She had 4 little kids, 8. And the bear was chased between their car and her children by these dogs. She and her kids were they were petrified. She couldn't find a couple of the kids. The men were armed. There was a young boy that had a gun that was following. And the hunters basically said, you know, they can do whatever they want. So they were among those that were calling. They were quite traumatized. They still are. But they were also people who grew up coming to Montreat. They had never had this happen. I've never seen it happen. So I think the fact that we have bears is not the issue. They're dangerous enough. It's the introduction of the dogs. So my question, I guess, is it's really disheartening to realize we can't pass a law that says no bear hunting in Montreat. That we have to have the General Assembly has already said that we don't have that authority, correct?
Well, yeah, essentially, yes. The way North Carolina, we can't say there's no hunting in Montreat. That's correct. We can say, and we already have said in our ordinance, you can't fire a gun in Montreat. We can say you can't even fire a BB gun in Montreat, and we have. That's in our ordinance. But we can't say you can't hunt.
You can make a town ordinance, which that's not through us either. That would be through your local police department. But you can't really pass on law. It's not for me to say, but you have to go through your and all that to try to get it passed.
I think what she's referring to is perhaps a special act. You could get no hunting. But the way North Carolina law reads is when the state basically preempts local regulation, when they have a comprehensive regulatory scheme governing particular activities. And hunting is one of those. It's statewide, it's uniform, and there are no special hunting laws of any sort in any county or municipality. You'd really have to go to the legislature, my understanding, to get that. Tanner?
So just one of the questions I have about this. So when we harvest the bear, we do that, that's with a firearm, right? You would kill it. The dogs don't kill the bear, somebody shoots it. If you can't discharge a weapon in a firearm in Montreat, in the town of Montreat, MRA, our own policies prevent having firearms on our property, period. I wonder if there's some way you look at that, I mean, if someone is here in town and they kill a bear, by nature, they have violated some law, ordinance, what have you, right? And so I'm just wondering, I mean, again, I know part of the issue is if you're chasing a bear, that bear may be what the threat is, but I am wondering if somebody's chasing a bear through town, they're not gonna, like, the assumed end is that they would shoot that bear. It seems.
That's correct. And what I've been told is in the incident up in Chapman Road, they're basically were trying to chase the bear over into over the ridge. They were trying to chase the bear over to the ridge crest to shoot it there.
And Walter, I mean, so if we had something like that, no hunting, and again, it sounds like obviously if we don't have the guns in Montreat or on the MRA property, then that theoretically does away with the hunting and shooting the bear. But how is that law going to stop the dogs from potentially running over the ridge line? Is that ultimately what you're after? I mean, or is it?
No, I think dogs run into Montreat every year. I mean, we've seen them. It's these guys who came in with their trucks and let them out.
I agree.
And they were letting them out in the middle of the street in front of your house. They were letting them out where my niece was. They were driving up and down the roads. That's different from dogs just running. So even if we came up with something, would they abide by it? Would they know about it? Would they care? I talked to one person who said they came up to him and said, if the bear's on your property, I have a right to shoot it if you tell me I can. And apparently that's not legal in Montreat. You're not allowed to discharge a firearm, but the bear hunter was telling him he could do it if he had to.
The bear hunter the bear hunter's wrong. In North Carolina, he has no right to retrieve
So my point though,
or
is
right to fire a firearm in
whatever we
Montreat.
come up with, how is the bear, if these are sort of rogue hunters, how are you going to get them to follow any rule you come up with?
Yes, when we're looking at crafting some sort of thing that is going to have a fine of some sorts as a preemptive, as a deterrent. Keeping track here of a few things. When we come across danger or risk or threat, we've already hit on that more than a few times in this. When we look at the three actors involved in all this, the bear, the dogs, and there's more an appropriate word, but I'm going to say jerks that were behind all of this. I think the dog owners are the root cause behind all of this. Whether it was, the activity that they were engaging in, they allowed to continue on, the interaction they've had with some of the Montreaters, as far as telling them, yeah, I can shoot on your property if you say no, or I can do this, or I can do that. People lie to people all the time. It does happen, unfortunately. Also, in occasions like that, To my knowledge, we were not getting reports of that. That is something we would be very interested in shutting down incredibly quickly when it does occur. We were also having some staffing issues during the course of those few days as well. So it was a compounding thing over the course of those few days until it all came to a head on Saturday.
You didn't have staff working? Because we only have one officer per shift.
Correct, due to the policy that was in place at the time, due to COVID restrictions, 3 out of the 4 of us were sidelined. Against my objection, but unfortunately that policy was there. So we were relying heavily on Black Mountain to catch our calls for service, but we did have a lack of presence during that time. I would, that stands to reason that cat's away, the mice will play, I guess.
Aaron, do you have any insight from other communities that you work within in Buncombe County that or suggestions that might be helpful for us?
Have y'all done any of the purple paint? Have y'all tried that?
Say that again.
The
Purple paint.
Yeah.
Let me explain. There's and this is where Tanner might be of some assistance in this whole process. The state passed a decade ago, maybe a little bit more, what's called the Landowner Protection Act. And it was essentially a way to effectively enforce trespass, particularly hunting trespass. And it allows any law enforcement officer the ability to come in and essentially quickly write a trespass ticket without getting into a very difficult legal procedure, which they were faced with before, if property is properly posted. Now, posting, particularly keeping posted signs up, is extremely difficult in rural areas. And so part of the statute allows, in lieu of posting, to paint trees and post purple every so many feet. And when you create that barrier with purple paint, when somebody crosses that line as a hunter, they can be arrested for trespass by any law enforcement authority. And unless they've got an excuse or a card from a club that's been given permission to cross that line, then they can be arrested. So, for example, MRA could put purple paint across the tree line every so many feet, and everyone in the Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting Club could have by virtue of their membership card, would be exempt from being arrested for trespass. Anybody else across that line, with or without a dog, but with a gun hunting, am I right, Aaron, could be arrested for trespass. So that's purple paint.
And is that's specific to hunting? So like a hiker, for instance, wouldn't.
It's hunting, and all hunters should be aware of the purple paint. I know.
Do you find that effective? Excuse me. Do you
Yes,
find,
it's been very effective. Yes, sir.
The technology for hunting today is really so far advanced that most all the hunters that are bear hunting have these Garmin trackers, which you could even have the individual house parcel lines on it. It shows the national forest boundaries. It shows our private property line. It shows the Asheville watershed line. It shows the town of Montreat different line. I mean, so for a hunter to really plead ignorance, I mean, we could say the bear, we say that bear, it'll say it's 100 feet that way. And you could see the property line on your Garmin, where that bear is, where your dogs are. So it's not an excuse, it'd be a heck of a job for the town of Montreat to have to go around every 50 feet and paint a purple swatch of a tree. Because hunters really should know where they're at. when they're, and if they know they're in Montreat, they know they're in Montreat.
But again, I love that. And I appreciate the fact that would be a burden for the MRA or the town or whatever. But it's still, what does it do to that group that came in? You know, that's where I'm trying to figure out how can we get some teeth or an ordinance or something, which I generally am not a big fan of ordinances, but how can we stop the outside groups that, again, might have the technology, but apparently are thumbing their nose at it and saying, no, you know, we're making the laws. You know, that part I don't appreciate.
There's part of me in some of this, at least when we originally talked about this, when I heard what happened in January, and you and I were talking about this, kind of the impression that I had of the hunters, that particularly the ones that were violating this, were people that just either didn't know or didn't care, but were just, it was a one or two kind of person operation that you know, was just what started in the wildlife management area and might not know, you know, suddenly they're under a house or almost next to a house, and thought this was some kind of free reign territory that they could run into. But it sounds like that's not really like they really know what they're doing in your mind. I guess where I'm getting at is, I don't know how I think there's the issue of what do you do that has teeth that allows them to give it a second guess before they come in here. But I think there's also this element of how do we get to them in advance and let them know before they come? And I really don't know the answer, but I don't know if like our friends at Mill Creek could kind of help tell us, you know, how you get that message out. But that seems like that would be an important point as well, because I suspect, and while this is probably the first time it's gotten to this level, certainly, I'd suspect, you know, over the years it may be getting a little more pronounced and a little more pronounced, and then here we are. So I suspect word kind of travels in that arena. Like, oh yeah, this is where some good hunting is.
Question just came to mind. When you're coming down to retrieve dogs, do your club members typically have to bring their trucks in? Of course, you're already right up there, so you'd come down Appalachian if you needed to.
Combination of both. If the hunter's in the woods, all the hunters carry dog leads. If you can catch a dog, you catch it, you put it on a lead, you walk it out. If we see it's in Montreat, the quickest way would be to drive the truck down and then try to catch the dog. We can see where the dog is. I mean, it'll say, you know, a quarter mile this way, 500 feet, and then there's the dog. I mean, they're easy to find. Like when my granddad used to hunt, they had a walkie-talkie. You had no idea. I mean, you listen for the dog barking and say, well, I think he's over that way. It's not like that anymore. You know where your dogs are.
Can do your members' trucks, do they carry stickers, or could they carry stickers?
Oh, we could, yeah. We don't have at the current time. Each of the club members has a membership card. But I mean, we could have stickers put on the back windows of the dog handlers that are authorized, if that would be a benefit to Montreat.
Don't know that would, but it's you know, maybe it could factor in, again, the idea being to do something that, you know, has some teeth, but doesn't, you know, adversely affect you folks. And again, working together.
So it sounds like Jim's group is not the problem, because he basically said what happened occurred because the people drove the dogs in and released them. And that's not his practice. Maybe his group could be the only group that's allowed to hunt, and anyone else is discovered, they get arrested or fined or whatever you want to do.
That's concept. I mean, or at least allowed to come on to retrieve their dogs. They could have permission to retrieve.
We don't want to hunt in Montreat, but we do want to be able to work with Montreat to get our dogs and not cause any problem or danger to the town folk.
I think we can get to a nice coverage easy enough, because of the very nature of Montreat, which has helped us out in other ways in the past. Everything up here is private property in some form or fashion. So any sort of retrieval of any kind, we can stipulate that law enforcement has to be notified in some sort of oversight, chaperone capacity or something, if that's the case.
One thing that I will say, that the people that we know that have contributed to this problem, we will reach out to them and tell them that it is a problem and that Montreat will take action against them if they continue. We have club members that know these people, and we can at least get the word out to them that this will no longer be tolerated.
I think that's a great start. I think we spoke about that one or two times earlier when you came. I think a lot of times if we can police something, hey, well, I'm not a bear hunter, but other guys that are bear hunting clubs, you got a common interest, but also to respect this whole valley that we're in. I think that's a great place to start. I would hope, with respect to this community, they would adhere to that.
Well, I won't swear that it's fact, but I would say it's a pretty fair guess, pretty solid that that word has already gotten to these folks. So any repeat to this would I would certainly consider the thumbing of the nose to the town in general.
Yeah, I think that's what I want to see happen, because I know Jim's got a lot more clout than we do. And I imagine that he can say things better as well. But I do think the town still needs to do something. Even if it doesn't have a whole lot of teeth. The simple fact of doing something and then making sure that's public, that sends another message that we're serious, that we're not just going to say, okay, we don't expect it to happen again because we've talked to them, but we also do something. The last idea I have is the purple paint sounds great. Could we just paint the gate purple? And would that be enough to discourage them?
Walter, you're right. I was thinking about that when Jim was talking, that it's not just Jim's members telling the rogue hunters, hey, you're going to Montreat, they'll get you. Because if we don't have any ordinances that support that, so it's got to be a two-phase thing. If there's no teeth in what his guys are saying to them, they'll be back the day after tomorrow.
And Walter, I'm typically, as I've stated before, I'm not a big fan of writing ordinances. I want to make sure if we do write something, that is something that we can enforce, that we're not just writing something that is not enforceable yet. I want to be careful that we don't write something. And again, I appreciate you being here tonight, Jim, and multiple times in your group, that we're writing something that, in essence, a group that we do have a good relationship with, it comes back and it's somewhat harmful to them. Now, if they're violating whatever we write, then so be it. But I would like to, that we all have some input there. If we do write something that's beneficial and it's something that we can enforce and not just be chasing our tail.
Mr. Otto, I would agree with your comments, and it goes, Jolie, to your comments earlier that recognizing the Bear Club is doing things right. I think we need to be cautious of excluding one group of people while granting a privilege to another group. Just open up a can of worms there. unless you wanted to have a franchise in the city, I'm speaking tongue in cheek, would entertain any kind of franchise as a revenue stream. But in all seriousness, you just don't want to put one group on a pedestal and penalize other groups while you're engaging in similar type behavior. I don't know if I made myself clear, but kind of goes to your point, Mr. Otto. I will say that the Mountain Retreat Association, though, can have a relationship with the, and have reciprocal agreements with the, and does have reciprocal agreements, I think, with the Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting Club. And although the town can't do that, the MRA is free to do it.
It still sounds to me like it would be helpful to have the people pass through the town hall and fill out some information if they're going to hunt bears in this vicinity. Then we're all clear on who the people are. I think that seems to me a missing piece here. You all seem to know who they are. But I think that's a helpful piece of information to have, particularly if you want to institute some charges against them and make it stick if it comes to that.
Well, I think they wouldn't be hunting in Montreat, so we couldn't get their name for hunting, but we could, I think the chief alluded to it, have some sort of requirement that you can't come in Montreat to retrieve bears without some sort of process. Bears or dogs.
Again, that's getting notification and a little bit of oversight. So we're not seeing, again, the shenanigans that we saw out of this group in December. You know, at this point, I cannot prove it, but it's my firm belief that under the guise of retrieval, they were in fact trying to flush their curry to where they could take it. For what Mr. Blackburn brought up here, as far as favor with one group, but not against another, again, you have to be a member of the Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting Club to hunt in that territory, correct? Everything else being private property, I doubt the MRA is going to give, license or something like that.
We're
So
not.
I think that does give exclusivity to them without us getting into a territory that we have to worry about that, since that's, with that bear hunting area there, but it's for them, by them. So everything else is off limits anyway.
It does make me think about, like, what are the carrot and stick ramifications that would increase dog retrieval traffic that might be unintended, right? Like if there is, and I don't know what caused this, right? But if somebody who was doing this, like, oh, well, if I register or whatever, then I'm able to come in and retrieve that dog. Does that open up a bigger floodgate that maybe we don't intend? I think I'm just throwing that out as food for fodder.
You know, what happened with Joe Lee and on the Rogers property, those were probably rogue hunters who came, dropped their dogs off. And Jim, what's that area over? There's a public area that they can hunt in between Black Mountain and Ridgecrest.
There's a lot of national forest and game lands.
Okay.
All around.
Which then leads into your property, which then leads into Jolie's property. And those are the ones that are problematic, that are coming in that way, but also the same groups that are coming in via the streets to pick up their dogs.
But they did not contact the chief and say, in an orderly manner, we'd like to come retrieve our dogs.
My sense is, from what I've heard about these good old boys that invaded Montreat, if they know they have to go put the information and register at the town hall, I doubt seriously if they're going to come back. That would be a discouragement, it seems to me, to them, to put their name in black and white, where they live, and how many dogs they have, and what kind of trackers they have, and what's their license plate.
Well, I think we can cover all those bases just simply with that, having the things put into place where you have to contact law enforcement if you wanted to, you know, my dogs have ran over the ridge. We would like to retrieve them. They're in the area of Chapman Road or what have you there, you know, and if they have to contact law enforcement, yeah, sure, we'll probably be getting some information. At the very least, we're going to take down the tag, you know, because we're going to be calling dispatch to let them know, hey, we're in contact with this person for this reason. Here's where we're at. That's just an officer safety sort of thing. Whether we're initiating a traffic stop or helping somebody change their tire or any knock and talk, anything like that. So that information of the owners will be a matter of record. So again, that covers the basis. It's not necessarily something where somewhere in the first 2 weeks of October, they're going to come down and fill out a preliminary sheet at the town hall, just in case they have to retrieve dogs throughout that particular hunting season.
But Rusty, wasn't your point that it might deter people?
Correct. One thing about it is that, you know, again, anytime prior to that Saturday, that January 1st, you know, if I've been driving around town seeing that activity, I wasn't going to just roll up the window like, oh, boy, if we only had something on the books for this. It's not going to be the case. It was pull up, what are y'all doing?
I do think we need to look into Jane, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
To me, it seems like it's really the area that we need to be looking at is trespassing. You know, if someone has not contacted our safety people and told them that they do have dogs in there and they do need to go in there and retrieve them, that's trespassing if they have not made some type of attempt to talk to someone in the town.
I think that's a very good point. I think that's a very good point. It's you know, after thinking through, the trespass is a very good way to do that. And we could limit the trespass just as the state limits the Purple Paint Landowner Protection Act to hunting. We could craft a trespass ordinance for the town of Montreat that related to you know, this specific situation, bear hunting with dogs, and requiring, I mean, I'm just talking out loud, but and again, we'll need to take a look at it, but requiring registration or direct contact, some contact with the police before going into any private lands in Montreat. And, you know, the failure to do that and get that permission or registration or whatever, it constitutes trespass and lets you then go up and write them a ticket and a stiff ticket.
We certainly could, you know, I forget which one of you gentlemen made the comment about painting the gate purple. I would vote for that. If we looked at some sort of townwide ordinance that was going to, you know, give us a tool, you know, for trespassing, or, you know, okay, let's maybe look at that. That's a good deterrent. Make sure that's put on blast prior to the hunting season, you know. So unfortunately, it's going to put undue hardship on the hunters that are doing it right. Like, I really need to do everything I can to make sure the dogs don't slip into town limits. One concern I do have is if we had that where it was they wanted to retrieve their dogs, they contact law enforcement, and then as we have been talking, it just dawned on me a few minutes ago, okay, once law enforcement comes on scene, okay, let's all trespass together with these dogs if we've not contacted the homeowner. So does Does that put us on a slippery slope?
Well, first, I think we can make it to where it's not, it seems to me where it's not a burden on the Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting Club. Now, I think we should be able to craft it in a way that it isn't. I mean, if they're talking 3 or 4, 5 instances a year where they've got a way to easily do that with a phone call. I don't think that really should be a problem. I mean, I think we can maybe do that in a way that works. We'll have to, to work on that portion of it.
Well, and whatever is to be crafted here, as long as we can have a general kind of good faith consensus, from the residents of Montreat as a whole, saying, no, I understand, listen, I'm not there 6 months out of the year. If there's a problem, do what we think is best. Sort of thing. So I'm just trying to look at the angles that might get us into a complicated situation.
Ask another question, Jim, about this technology that the hunters use. Can you call your dogs off? So you can't just send a signal that says, get away from the bear that you're attacking. Well, I just wondered, you guys have such great technology, but I guess that didn't work.
Well, there are training collars and shock collars, and it's different from tracking a dog a mile away and sending an electric current to his collar. I mean, that's not correct. And to be honest with you, a lot of people can't catch other people's dogs. Bear dogs can be very skittish. And a lot of times the only person that can catch that dog is the owner of that dog. And so, when Donovan's dog, Donovan Smith back here, he's our secretary, his dog comes down into Montreat, he may be the only one that can actually get up and get a hand on that dog. So shocking is not really, it's not going to.
So Jim, I've heard a couple of things here. Again, I think you addressing the other club, which I think probably has already happened and can again be addressed again. I appreciate that. The trespass ordinance that's kind of been floated out here. Is it realistic in the heat of the battle, your dogs, your group, whether it's 10 men, 20 men, whatever on that given day, that they're going to be, when I'm responsible enough to call into Montreat and say, hey, we're getting ready to come over the ridge. We got dogs heading that way, to not put them in a trespassing situation. Is that reasonable? Your men would be able to do that?
We would work around that. Work with you.
Yeah, okay.
But most of the time, the dogs and the bear aren't going to stop. They're going to go right through Montreat and over the hill and into the watershed. And it's really, if we can't catch them before they get here, a lot of times, unless they tree that bear, you're not gonna get up with it. I mean, you just have to. That's where the problem comes in, is if they catch the bear on the ground in Montreat in these residential neighborhoods, that's where you might have dangerous situations. Typically, like what you were saying, that for years you might hear a dog or see a dog, and that bear may have been through there 10 minutes before. The dogs are just kind of going, trailing it up. And by the time we got there, he's already another half a mile. We catch it when we can. And we will definitely work with the chief and the police department if we have to come into Montreat to retrieve our dogs.
Okay.
And then with the MRA, if we have to, go up in the wilderness to get dogs. But we definitely don't want to have our dogs in the residential areas.
And again, I trust you in that statement. And then one follow-up, how realistic is it, as Rusty has suggested with your club or any other club, if there was, again, how realistic and or burdensome to your club to have the 15, 20 men or whatever on file? Is that realistic, or does it roll over a little bit too much for that to really happen?
We probably have, I don't know, 60 to 70 members in our club, but there are probably only 6 or 8 or 10 people that own dogs. So if that was something that the town of Montreat wanted us to do, we could gladly have our dog owners, fill out and let Chief know who they are. He probably knows them anyway.
Sure. I mean, does that somewhat touch what you're asking there, Rusty? I mean, because then, now we've narrowed it down to roughly 10 vehicle / dog owners that should be coming into our community. And I think as you just suggested,
Well,
maybe you know them.
A lot of times people will pick a dog up that's not the owner and take it, if they can catch it, take it to the owner. But I mean, to have the owners register would not be a burden, but I don't think you'd want all 70 club members to come register.
I think we cover a lot of ground just simply in having identifiers with all your members, be it the sticker on the truck with the dog box on it, a membership card that can be presented, things like that. Again, that gets us through. We come across a truck with a dog box, at any given point up here in Montreat. It does not have that sticker showing, nor is there nobody in there that can produce any kind of membership. The gig's up right there. We know they're not part of the bear hunting club. We know they're not hunting on MRI property, or they certainly shouldn't be. Then we step in and start taking our prescribed action from there.
We will definitely move forward and get a decal to put on the windshield of the hunters' vehicles, especially the ones that have dogs. But the club members will carry a card and their vehicles will be identified by hunting season.
Will that put any undue harsh financial?
No, we
thing
can
on
have stickers made that says Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting Club. They're cheap. I mean, stickers, you get them printed at graphics place, that's not going to be cost prohibitive at all.
The time of that the incidents happened was right at the end of bear hunting season. And I'm thinking probably it happened because there were people who maybe had not gotten their bear and they were looking for sort of an easy way to come in. So I think that during that time, it may be good for our police officers maybe to be more present during that time.
What a very good point. Anybody got any other further comments, suggestions, things I'd like to add, questions I'd like to ask?
I think there's a third component that we talked about a couple months ago that we haven't talked about tonight, and that is that there's some community education, I think, that can and should be done. North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission has a Bear Wise program, and if we were to get together with them, as well as have some points that we share with residents about what they can and should do and what they should not do, that would and make sure it gets communicated to all residents, that could be that third leg on that stool.
I agree, and that goes to what Kent, I think, was alluding to at least a little bit. We need to have habits that keep our bear population down. because if we are not careful, we'll increase our bear population without really intending to. Okay, well, we're just about at an hour and a half. If without objection, I think we're ready to wrap it up. I thank everybody. We did not have any public comment, again, because this was intended to be just what it was, a roundtable discussion. But if there's somebody from the public would like to make just a 10 or 15-second comment or statement, we take it at this time. Otherwise, we'll wrap up the meeting and the commission will take up further discussion of what it may want to do at its later regular meetings. All right, if there's nothing further.
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Commissioner Otto has made a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? By Commissioner Alexander. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.